One of the most fascinating things about Sleep Token is that we can interpret it any way that we like. And by it, I mean the music based on information that we've been given. And therein, it's incredibly exciting because we can interpret it as just music. You can ignore the law entirely. You can look at just maybe the psychological perspectives, look at it from an alchemical perspective. You can really take it and glean from the music, from the band, from everything that these gentlemen are putting out. You can glean from it what you want. That is rather the point of Sleep Token. But there is something that I simply shall not concede on. That Sleep Token is a piece of musical theatre. This has been carefully constructed. This is a living, breathing piece of musical theatre of which we don't know truly the beginning, the middle, the ending, and we have to kind of make up the plot ourselves based on source material. Now, over on Twitch recently, we've been going back through EP1 and EP2, taking a dive into what happened in Nazareth. Why were these fields so loamy? Where was the birth of Vessel? Where was the birth of perhaps the relationship between Vessel and Sleep? But alongside that, there is source material, actual words from the man himself, and indeed words from his publicist. We have to go back to 2016 for this, but I think this is important to keep us in check, those of us who are very interested in the potential lore of this relationship between a man called Vessel and a deity called Sleep. How did they come together? Well, we are kind of told. Back in 2016, Sleep Token's publicist at the time said this: Sleep Token are a masked, anonymous collective of musicians, united by their worship of an ancient deity crudely dubbed Sleep, since no modern tongue can properly express its name. This being once held great power, bestowing ancient civilizations with the gift of dreams and the curse of nightmares. Even today, though faded from prominence, Sleep yet lurks in the subconscious minds of man, woman, and child alike. Fragments of beauty, horror, anguish, pain, happiness, joy, anger, disgust, and fear coalesce to create expansive, emotionally textured music that simultaneously embodies the darkest and the brightest abstract thoughts. He has seen them. He has felt them. He is everywhere. Sleep Token, led by the perpetually tormented, supremely talented Vessel, creates music that brings to the fore our most submerged thoughts and feelings, coaxing them from the desolate, terrifying caves of our subconscious mind. Now, depending on which interpretation you want to take, whether it be psychological, whether it be law-based, there are lots of words in there. There's lots of context there that can feed into our own theories. And as I always tell everyone, my theories could be absolute bollocks. But I like what initially Vessel said. The band's existence was there for us to dive into that dark place, to come to terms with things that maybe by him being masked, the man behind the mask, when he puts that mask on and performs as Vessel, it's a communication thing. There isn't a breakdown in communication because he's masked. If anything, it helps him express these thoughts in a more dark, in a more passionate, in a way that potentially he couldn't without being masked. We know that Vessel encountered for the first time Sleep in a dream, who promised the Vessel magnificence and glory if they served him. In many ways, the Vessel here takes on quite a religious context. Without Vessel, the waning god can never come back to prominence. And through these four gentlemen who toured the world telling us all about how good and bad Sleep is, it doesn't matter to the deity, because as the word is spread, they become stronger. In that respect, it's like pretty much every religion in history. And I think it is important to go back and always keep one eye on the source material when we start to get excited and make up our own lore. And although we've just started on the album Sundowning, indeed we're on to track 3, Levitate, today, there are many people who believe that all of the stuff that happened in EP 1 and 2, with the exception of Jericho, actually didn't happen then in the chronology of the story. In fact, many people believe that actually the story of Sleep Token, the beginning of the relationship between Vessel and Sleep, started at the beginning of This Place Will Become Your Tomb with Atlantic. And don't get me wrong, I can completely buy into that, because like I say, every one of these theories are simply that. But keeping one eye on the Scarlet Trail, I think, is important to keep us, well, in check. And so from that perspective, I often try and be quite analytical with some of the lyrics, often removing them from the music themselves in order to create a monologue, to try and break down the individual thought processes of where these lyrics came from, and also who is singing to whom. Because I believe that there are many songs that we rather take as rote because the man behind the mask stands on stage with a microphone, that it is from the perspective of Vessel. But I believe that a lot of these songs are from the perspective of Sleep, and I think a lot more than we originally possibly give them credit for. A lot more of these songs are duets, and that is quite important in the lyrical construct of Levitate. And another thing I think we should always consider are the title of the songs, which are very much by design. So with that said, I'd like to have a little bit of a dive into the etymology of levitate, and indeed, what is levitation? To levitate, levitation is not flying. It is something more spiritual than that. In fact, it's sometimes a lot more base than that. In fact, I'm pretty sure every one of us can remember in the playground when you try and do that thing where you balance and lift one. Ooh, look at me. That's not levitating. Levitation, if you like, is a feeling of lightness. It's a feeling of rising. But the story behind the word, I think, goes deeper than that. And it sets pretty much the perfect tone for what's about to be expressed in this song. Etymologically, levitate comes from the Latin word levere or levere, meaning to lift or to raise. It is the root word etymologically, if you like, for words like elevator and lever and alleviate. And those words are not necessarily just about rising up, but they're about lifting a weight as well. So even in the earliest form of the word levitate, it was about a sense of feeling lighter, potentially a sense of relief. But we can go even further back to that, to Proto-Indo-European, and this word, which I'm definitely not trying to pronounce. It simply means light in weight. And that lightness, if you like, shows up over and over again. It's almost like it's a universal human desire to feel unburdened. Levitate, in a more spiritual sense, means, well, pretty much exactly that. It is the lightening of the spirit, the loosening of the spirit. In Hinduism and Buddhism, levitation is referred to as an emergent property of spiritual refinement. In shamanic traditions, rising above the world, if you like, levitating, represented moving on to the unseen realms, potentially to the other world. And in Christian mysticism, it was the saints. The saints lifted from the ground when they were in a kind of ecstatic union with the divine. They ascended because of their relationship with a god. But everywhere levitation is, it points to one core idea. In order to rise, in order to ascend, one must become lighter. One must release a burden. And while releasing a burden can be a physical thing, that's not what we're talking about here. You see, this is about becoming lighter psychologically. This, if you like, is becoming lighter spiritually. And that, my friends, leads us once again to alchemy. Alchemy is fundamentally the study of transmutation, taking something heavy and making it light, taking something base and making it noble. Alchemists often refer to this ascent as sublimatio or sublimatio. It is the rising, the evaporating, the transformation between something that was low, something that was dark, something that was, in a sense, useless, and through the act of the alchemical process, taking it to a higher state, which of course is strikingly similar to the spiritual metaphor of levitation. Alchemy teaches us that anything, even the basest material, can rise, but only after it's gone through purification. To think of the act of rising, ascending, of levitating in an alchemical sense, we have to think of the 4 stages of the magnum opus. And long before the ascent, long before we are able to rise, there is nigredo. Nigredo is the black hour. It is where the vessel, the worshipper cries out, not necessarily to be saved, but to be lightened, to be unburdened of something, and often spiritually or psychologically. In order to be unburdened, in order to be risen, to be lightened, something has to break first, because nothing rises until something breaks. Then comes albedo, the flood of whitening. It is erosion of something, but it hurts, it stings, it gives us that sharp intake of breath. This is the part where instead of ascending upwards, we rather move inwards. In terms of Jungian psychology, it would be where the ego for the first time gives in and rather dives into the shadow. It dives into the personal unconscious, or indeed the collective unconscious that we all have, as Carl Gustav Jung has studied and taught us so much about this. In fact, Jung, you will know from some of my previous videos, dived very much into alchemy as a way of talking about spiritual transmutation. Although the act of alchemy itself was done with base materials, they were trying to make gold from lead with chemicals, with compounds. The burning of the putrefaction, this was all necessary. But Jung saw it in a much more psychological perspective. He saw it as us diving, like this is albedo. We get through nigredo, the darkness, where we realize that something has to break in order for us to get better, for us to ascend, for us to get what we need, maybe just to be our essential self. But it's going to hurt. And we rather get that in EP1, where Sleep, or I believe the voice of Sleep, tells Vessel that, look, I can take you with me, I can give you glory, but it's gonna hurt. But it is in that second stage of alchemy, that dive into the breaking up, the whitening the first time, that maybe we get the first hint of ascension, the first hint that we may be able to levitate above the darkness, the shadow. The third stage is citronitis, often referred to as the yellow dawn. I've always imagined it as like sunlight trying to burst out of our chest through the cracks that have been created by nigredo and albedo, the first two processes, the diving into the shadow, the breaking up of the thing we were carrying, the burden, that somehow it starts to shine through for the first time like a weird boob dawn. But true ascension, true levitation, true rising cannot happen until we get to the final stage, rubedo. That is, if you like, the hour of union. It is where we come together, potentially with our burden, and offer it personal release, at least from a psychological perspective. But it is where all of the burning and the compounds and the chemicals that alchemists used to put in to create this process, potentially the magnum opus in that. Jung believed that the psychological magnum opus was individuation. It was the coming together of the shadow and the ego. It was creating one's essential self. And I know what you're thinking, Glenn, can we listen to the fucking song now? Not yet, because as you will know from the sigils attached to each one of these songs on Sundowning, that there is more at play here with alchemy than just its relation to levitation, to the word levitate. Some of you who follow me on Twitch will already recognize this document. Thank you, by the way, to everybody who follows me on Twitch, because we made partner this month, which is just utterly bonkers. The fact that we can come and sit and talk about music for hours on end in our little corner of the internet is brilliant. Thank you, everyone. This is a publicly available document. It is linked in the description below with credit to the original author. And it goes through, as we have done already, all of the sigils and the breakdown of at least the alchemical symbols within these sigils. And we've just left The Offering, at least that's where we are in the album. Track 2 of Sundowning, The Offering, where a crucible has burned something and there has been fumes. There's those 3 prongs over here on the right-hand side. Let me just see if I've got a cursor. No, I haven't. The 3 prongs there are a release of vapor. They are a release of something. But there is always something left behind. And that, I think, may become significant later on once we dissect the lyrics, is the fear of being left behind while somebody else levitates, somebody else ascends. And also that it isn't necessarily from the voice of Vessel to sleep. So on symbol 1 here, we have to decompose putrefaction, as we've just been talking about the 4 stages of alchemy: nigredo, albedo, citronitis, and rubedo. But in the crucible there, it isn't actually a crucible this time. The crucible was the triangle here on the just below me, just down here. That was the crucible in which you would burn the base materials in order to get something more pure, in order the first act of alchemy, if you like. And while we still seem to be burning something, it's slightly different now, because number 3 here is white arsenic. Now, white arsenic is known as the poison of kings. Indeed, if you would like to read all of this, please do go and have a look at the document in the description below. But white arsenic was the first poison. It was a great way of hiding, because it was basically untraceable. In part 4 here, we see that repeating symbol from the offering. On part 3 over there with the fumes being released, the vapors being released. And indeed, I do think that number 5 is probably a physical embodiment of that as well. Ash is left behind. There's always something left behind. Energy cannot be destroyed. It has to move from different means, different ways of keeping itself alive. And so, after all of that potential bollocks, it's time to have a dive into Levitate, the 3rd track from 2019 Sundowning by Sleep Token. And just before we get to it, I would say, if you've never watched this before, you're doing your own research, you'd like to dive into a little bit deeper as to what the other meanings behind this could be, keep an eye on the visualizer all the time as well for what mood, what the author is trying to express visually, because these visualizers weren't put together by whimsy. They have a message too. Right, enough. 2019, Sundowning, Levitate. Let's do it.
And I can lift you up.
We're in C major.
Body is mostly blood, like water, a perfect flood. Engulfing me again. No.
Engulfing is an interesting choice of lyric.
I can tell you won't remember my cracking bones, the trauma we can't regrow. Just as you leave again, no. Will you levitate up where the angels inhabit? Will you levitate where I won't reach you?
He's being very careful about the diction, and there's a creak at the end of every one of those lines in his voice.
A story of perfect days, a ballad we fabricate as you forget your words again. No. And is that all you need?
It's really patient. Enya drums.
Will you levitate where I won't reach you? Will you levitate up where my love doesn't matter? Will you levitate where I won't reach you? Will you levitate? Will you
Fuck off, Liam. So, first things first, before we do anything else, let's take a look at the music and the vocal performance. And if you've never watched one of my videos before, hello, you're in for a long ride. I tend to do the music first and then a bit of lyric analysis as well. And then everybody can go home. So just get that C in the middle of the piano.
lift you up?
At this point, I do think that the way that the piano moves in this in particular, I urge you to go and seek out Vessel's performance with Aspera. The room below, Levitate, played with just him on the piano, and how often he does these like clashy... like he adds little, what I would call like musical theatre notes into things, because obviously when one has a whole band behind backing it, you can create different dynamics with that than you can with just a piano. And he really does fill the space with his just massive Jimi Hendrix hands, being able to cover octaves I can't do with fucking two hands. But there is a little touch of musical theatre, Jason Robert Brown-esque musical theatre kind of writing in the piano part of this, particularly live.
Your body is mostly blood,
So he's in a very comfortable, rich range in his singing
like
voice there.
water, a perfect flood.
And he's croaking, he's just creaking at the end of every one of these lines.
Me again, no.
Like water, a perfect flood. He's right on the microphone, and every little nuance of this vocal performance is being picked up. And so there's huge amounts of atmosphere at the beginning of that. We're hearing every single word that he says.
And I can tell you won't
Ooh, there's a little riff in there.
remember my cracking bones, the trauma we can't regrow.
So we've just got a synth droning on the sea with just a piano and the voice.
Just as you leave again, no.
I'm doing it slightly over the top to accentuate, but there's a push. In fact, as you can hear on a great many songs, including Bloodsport, a lot of us have a natural timbre. We have certain notes in our voice that once we hit it, we can do a natural rasp on. Like, for example, I can sing the same notes as Teddy Swims, but I can't fucking sing like him because what he can do with his voice and the way he hits that rasp and the way he's able to access using his folds to create fry. But sometimes you just get little notes in your voice that over time they can change as well. Mine have changed since I was younger, but with Vessel he has certain notes that he can do. Bloodsport live as well, oh good, absolutely, yeah, all of that. But Vessel is very good at just adding emotion, just pushing it into the end of the notes and creaking and making us, I don't know, like the creaking of the chair and the production elements and with the complementary production here from George Lever, it all sounds very rich at this point, but it's all about the vocal line to start off here.
Will you levitate?
Will you levitate?
Up where the angels inhabit.
So all of the melodies being supported by those deep bass notes on the piano, and now we're starting to get a little bit of production bleeding through.
Will you levitate? Where I won't reach you.
There were a load of people on that beach.
And we
Now everything cut out there and just left us alone for a second, so that Vessel was able to place the first again. This being at least in its early stages, being a very vocal heavy track, as in we are meant to pay careful attention. It just drops out a little bit in order to create a little bit of room.
And we imitate
Lovely. Well done, George Lever.
a story of perfect days, a ballad we fabricate as you forget your words again. No.
You forget your words again. No, Vessel does this a lot. He likes to put O's and no's at the end of lines. Sometimes they mean something. Sometimes, I know we can all be accused of reading too much into it, but I think when you're in the studio and you write something like this, it's a little bit different to adding, those sexy bits at the end of Provider when he does it live. That you make a conscious choice to do that in the studio, and indeed on how many takes that these vocal lines took.
And is that all you need? So merely
The drums are way in the background, all of the tone off them.
falling in love with me.
I can't do that because I have a very different range to Vessel, but the way that he just really effortlessly, you can almost feel him like moving away from the microphone and bringing us through the vocal line, through the melody line. He's bringing us into it. He's creating more emotion, obviously, but he's dragging us into something that's about to happen. By everything's been placed quite low. Will you levitate? Wasn't very high, and now we've got into falling in love. It really opens out, and again, it's a little bit. That's musical theatre again to bring us into the next passage, the next movement in the music.
Forgetting the agony.
Plant. Sorry, I've got to do it. You've got to listen to this.
So merely pretend to be falling in love with me. forgetting the agony again. Oh, will you levitate
I mean, come the fuck on, Bridget.
up where the angels inhabit?
And you can hear the harmonies as well. It's so tight.
Will you levitate?
It's ethereal. It's
Where
beautiful.
I won't reach you.
Sorry, you just had to, because amazing, isn't it?
Will you up where the will you levitate up where the angels inhabit?
One of the curious things about the drum
Will you levitate where I won't reach you?
So the snare hits don't necessarily come where they would do in a conventional count of 4, and it sounds as well. And I quite like the duality of this. That it's being played, I think, on the floor tom, and then it's a digital clap. It's like a digital snare. So it's not a snare. It's a clap sound, and it offers something slightly odd. Because so far this has been very organic. It's been, very tight, admittedly tight vocal lines on the chorus. We've had strings. We've had a kind of like a drum with all the tone taken off, beating very gently in the background, like almost a muffled heartbeat. And then we get kind of a slightly disjointed, I call it the Enya drum beat. It's ever so slightly off. It doesn't sit quite in the box of 4 as a conventional pop song would. Not that I'm saying that Sleep Token are a pop band, but they do perform a lot of pop songs. And in a lot of ways, this is a dark pop song until we get to, well, a dark pop ballad, maybe, until we get to the breakdown at the end. So the drums being like that kind of pull us slightly out. They kind of, oh, hang on, that drum beat that pattern isn't exactly sitting where I think it would. And those of us who've listened to the song a lot now will know when those kind of electronic clap hits come in. The first time I listened to this, I found this one of the most difficult Sleep Token songs to listen to, very much because of that reason. Because when the drums came in, I was expecting convention, and I was expecting blocks of 4, and it didn't do that. And so I went, oh, that makes me feel, and that's exactly the point. It made me feel a bit like, hang on, that doesn't feel like everything's quite all right here. So in the background, we have the kind of what I would call it's almost like a Native American style. It's almost like, I suppose, it's not atonal, but it's as Vessel is wont to do. It's wailing in the background, but it's creating like a swirl in the air around us, and that's kind of quite cool because we're meant to be levitating here, right? And so we get this airy kind of siren going up with it. I think it's really quite a beautiful way of adding a little something to the song to bring us into the act of levitation. That who's got to grab who's escaping whom, or who is escaping what. Very breathy, retracted voice there.
Will you levitate?
Using his head voice, just pushing it through his nasal passage. Wanted to keep it breathy, to keep it emotional. Now we're getting the swell. The bass notes on the piano are coming through harder. We get This fades. That piercing wail. Real crunch on the distortion of those guitars as well. And that wail in the background has been clipped or sampled or whatever, and it's doing like an oscillating sound in the background as well, which is again giving us this airiness, but also it's not entirely in. I don't think it's entirely in time there as well, which is reminiscent of some of the stuff from EP2 actually, where sometimes it's not a counter melody as such, but a vocal affectation in the background will be repeated and it will go out of time. Again, just creating a slight sense of disjointedness, of incompleteness. That breakdown as well is all about the rhythm of the guitars against the guitars and the bass against the drums as well, where we stop. It's almost like there's a moment of breath in the music and the breakdown where we suddenly get a shock, or we suddenly we're snapped into being awake. I think that some of the beautiful little conventions, beautiful little ways of adding more depth to this. But yes, that wail in the background, that it pushes us upwards as Vessel's voice ascends in the background, so we kind of levitate with it in a way. And then we have a fade, which will take us into dark signs in the future. So to the lyrics, let's get right into them. I can lift you up. Your body is mostly blood, like water, a perfect flood, engulfing me again. Now, firstly, we have to think from what perspective is this song being sung? Because I can make an argument throughout all of these lyrics that it could be either from the perspective of Vessel or the perspective of Sleep. I think the majority of us lean into the most of this is from the perspective of Vessel, because they are scared that the love they have for this deity, at least in lore perspective, won't be enough, that they will ascend, they will levitate, they will rise without them. The promise of glory that they were given by spreading the word of the deity called Sleep may never be fulfilled. But we'll get to that in a moment. This is the part that puzzles me. I can lift you up. Your body is mostly blood. Now, I can hear that from the voice of Sleep as almost like bargaining. Because why would a deity's body, if we are having a balance between a man and indeed a deity, surely the body that is mostly blood is the man rather than the god. So I can see an argument for it being, I can lift you up, your body is mostly blood, like water, a perfect flood, engulfing me again. Now, that could be considered a little bit sycophantic, and that's rather where I go, maybe this isn't Sleep. Because it starts off with me thinking the first two lines are very Sleep-coded. However, let us move on. I can lift you up. Let's take it from Vessel's perspective for the majority of this without, but when I do believe it's the voice of Sleep, I shall chime in. I mean, listen, I've got fuck all else to talk about, haven't I? Like water, comma, a perfect flood. A perfect flood, the juxtaposition of the positive, perfection, a flood. Floods aren't necessarily good things, a perfect flood. Indeed, we could go back to, if you want, all the way back to the Old Testament. I mean, floods in the Old Testament were put there. That was what Noah's Ark was all about. It was a flood to get rid of all the baddies. And then Noah and the goodies and all the animals went off two by two. But it's a perfect flood engulfing me again. Now, I find this a little bit curious because anytime I think of the word engulf, I think of flames. When something is engulfed, it is engulfed in fire. If there is a fire in a barn or something, you say, oh, well, I mean, Ricky would say it was gulfing.
Trailer was golfing with flames. There's nothing I could do, buddy.
Trailer was golfing with flames?
Yeah, like flames fucking golfing out the roof, out the fucking door. It was golfing. There was nothing I could do.
A perfect flood engulfing me again. I don't know, there's slight fire and water juxtaposition there with the lyrics. And Vessel loves putting an "and" at the beginning of a the beginning of a line. And I can tell you won't remember my cracking bones, the trauma we can't regrow, just as you leave again. So I can tell you won't. This is where the again starts to have a little bit of feeling here, because, and I can tell you won't remember my cracking bones, as if some trauma, something has already happened, something that both parties were present in. That rather lends a lot of credence to the theory that this place will become your tomb, maybe the beginning of, or at least the beginning in terms of the trilogy of trauma up to the end of Take Me Back to Eden. But the cracking bones, the death that happened, whether it be spiritually, psychologically, or whether it was the vessel taking their own life, to show sleep that's how much, by throwing themselves into the ocean, by potentially diving down and battling, the sea monsters, the gods below the sea, the potential Leviathan son, but we'll get to that in another video. But I can tell you won't remember. I can tell you won't remember my cracking bones, what I did before, the trauma we can't regrow. Now, I'm going to put a little content warning here because I'm about to talk about people hurting themselves. Throughout a lot of the Sleep Token discography, a lot of the lyrical the background, a lot of the lyrics themselves, there are numerous allusions to self-harm. There are numerous allusions to trenches, to when something can't be regrown, it feels like scars. The trauma, because trauma, you have a trauma room in an ER in A&E. Trauma can be both something that we experience on an emotional level, but it can be physical as well. So coming after the lines of remember my cracking bones, the trauma to my body, the trauma that I put myself through, just as you leave again. I can tell you won't. You won't remember my cracking bones, the trauma that because the we makes me think that this rather like blood sport. That this was, when Vessel sings, I made loving you a blood sport, there is allusion to what they have done to themselves, what they've done to their body, what the effect that loving a deity called sleep, at least from a lore perspective, has done. And so to the chorus, will you levitate up where the angels inhabit? Will you levitate where I won't reach you? It's very interesting. It's not where I can't reach you. It's where I won't reach you. I rather like being next to someone and being beside someone. I think those two words have very different meanings, and they give the line a different sort of feeling. Will you levitate up where the angels inhabit? Not necessarily heaven. He doesn't say it from a particular, like a Christian perspective or whatever, or where we would commonly refer to heaven. It's where the angels inhabit, not where they live either. It's where they inhabit, just where the angels have their day-to-day life. Are you just going to nip back up there? The more that I spread the word of you, the more I spread the gospel of sleep, the further away you may get. In fact, at this stage, we're talking about it potentially from an alchemical process, that as the burning off happens, maybe sleep is the vapor, or maybe left behind is in the putrefaction is bits of the vessel, or maybe it's the other way around, and maybe it is sleep who is asking, will you levitate up where the angels inhabit? As I promised you when given the chance, will you take your leave? Will you levitate where I won't reach you? Because from that perspective, Vessel is meant to be a man worshipping a deity called sleep, at least from the law perspective. And so he can't go up there without sleep. Sleep can, we think, go up there as a god, but won't. It's where I won't reach you. Once you're up there, once you're in Arcadia, once the story has finished at the end of Take Me Back to Eden, maybe that's where I won't reach you. And maybe there's a lot to be read into that with a re-listen of Even in Arcadia. We get another conjunction to start us into verse 2. And we imitate a story of perfect days. A ballad we fabricate as you forget your words again. And is that all you need? To merely pretend to be falling in love with me, forgetting the agony again. Now, that again is important. Again. It lends credence potentially to the idea that we are already trapped in a cycle here, that this is going to happen over and over again. It reminds me of that incredible Nietzsche thing about if somebody told you, you're going to live this cycle. Every choice that you make in this life will be repeated ad nauseum forever and ever and ever again. Is this the beginning of the cycle? Because everything is again. Now, in terms of this just being a love song from the man behind the mask to whatever, we can understand why this may be again, why he wants to turn the page again, why he wants to dive into this person who maybe doesn't love him back in the same way that he loves them or loved them, and indeed is moving on through the grieving process of that. But are we stuck in a cycle already? Because it's again. This is happening again. Why does this continue happening? Forgetting the agony again. Let's go back to the beginning of the verse. And we imitate. This is actually beautiful songwriting, but incredibly sad. And we imitate a story of perfect days. We fake it. We fake that our relationship is a story of perfect days, that it is what we show the outer world, or what we lie to ourselves about. I mean, Say That You Will obviously addresses that pretty on the nose, but maybe they're just lying to each other. Maybe it's easier to lie about their relationship than it is to really dive down into the dark stuff. But until something breaks, one cannot rise. And we imitate a story of perfect days, a ballad we fabricate. A ballad. Ballads they're sung to someone or about someone. They're love songs. They are torch songs. They are often duets as well. But this is just fabrication. This doesn't mean anything. It's just, we're just going through the motions. And I know that because you keep forgetting your words again. Imagine being stood on a stage, and if anybody's ever done theatrical production where you've sung a duet or you've sung like a love song or a romantic song or whatever on stage, and you look at the person and you made and they look at you and go, nope. I've had it on occasion where you look at somebody in the eyes on stage and they go, and you're like, oh fuck, I've got to remember their part as well now. Also, I just want to go off on a tangent about the As You Forget Your Words Again. This album is called Sundowning. I talked extensively about sundowning syndrome in the Night Does Not Belong to God video. If you want to watch other videos, I'm sure there's a little thing up here if I remember. I'm sure. I'll do it. I'll sort it. The idea of forgetting your words again is linked to dementia too. It's linked to as it gets dark at night, as the shadows lengthen, those who suffer from sundowning syndrome get confused, they get more agitated. That is those who are already suffering from dementia as well. So this idea of pretending, this idea that perhaps this is somebody who has lost someone mentally, somebody who's lost a part of them, and that they're singing to them. We imitate a story of, oh God, oh dear, oof, I nearly had a minute. The idea that potentially like an older couple or somebody who loves a parent, a grandparent, whatever, is that we when dementia starts to take hold, you fake that everything is still normal. You try and make it look like we can still when somebody's suffering extensively from dementia, sometimes you do fabricate it, you fake it because it's to make them comfortable. And although they may not understand what is happening to them, and at times it may be very difficult for them to comprehend who people are, what relationships are, you try and keep everything as normal as possible. You try and keep everything as comfortable as possible. So you imitate a story of perfect days. A ballad we fabricate as you forget your words again. And our protagonist goes on, is that all you need to merely pretend to be falling in love with me, forgetting the agony again. I do think that a lot of this album is very much rooted in sundowning syndrome, in a relationship that somebody is having with somebody who is suffering from this. Because if you read that objectively, that could be applied 100%, I think, to somebody who is going through that. But from a law perspective, is that all you need to merely pretend to be falling in love with me, forgetting the agony again. And the juxtaposition of the music swelling as we get through the agony again, and then we burst into the double chorus. Will you levitate up where the angels inhabit? Will you levitate where I won't reach you? Will you levitate up where my love doesn't matter? Now, at the very end of this album, we're going to get the final line. You say it doesn't matter. This idea that love, or the feeling, or the something you are giving somebody, something that you are investing in, for them to say it doesn't matter, that is one of the worst feelings that you can have, when you've pushed a load of energy, a load of love, a load of emotion, and they're like, it doesn't matter. It's never going to matter. Because what you hear is, you are not enough. That's a tough thing to hear, especially when you're in a relationship, especially when you're a man called Vessel in love with a fucking god, and they say, doesn't matter. So when the god ascends, when the deity potentially ascends back to its place amongst the angels, well, your love doesn't matter. You're just a human. You're just, and as we've talked about before, potentially on a more human relationship level, just a booty call. You might be somebody there in the night, but in the daytime, I deny your existence. Or rather, when I feel you slipping away, I tell everybody, no, I'll tell everyone when it's the right time. But, as we're learning from this story, whoever is sleep, or whoever sleep represents, they don't ever fully go all in. What happens as well, if we are going to take a slightly Jungian perspective on this? What happens if sleep is the personification of the shadow? What if this is sleep concerned that the ego, Vessel, the person, we all have, by the way, a persona, which is what we push out to other people. That's what people see of us. It's the stuff that we put on social media when we go like, I look really good in that picture. That's your persona, but your ego is there all the time. And your ego is there to protect all of the stuff underneath, because that's where the shadow lives. What if sleep is the personification, or in this case, the deification of the shadow? What if it is sleep saying, well, hang on, if you become your essential self, if you ascend, if you levitate, you rise up, then what the fuck happens to me? Although many people's interpretations of Sleep Token songs have sleep as the villain, they have them as the harsh lover, the person who just wants to take everything that Vessel has until they are an empty husk and they can become godly. They can use all of the energy, all of the blood from the lower person, from the Vessel, to fill themselves up. What if that isn't the case? And I know sometimes I say I think sleep gets a bit of a bad rap, but that's because I like to think of this a lot of times as shadow work. And so the shadow would be concerned, right? What if you levitate where my love, where as dark as it is, where all of the things that you shove down, because the shadow our essential selves, our sagging meat suits that contain a soul and a mind, we made that shadow to an extent. And so what happens when we do levitate? What happens if we ascend where my love won't reach you? It won't reach you anymore because the act of individuation has happened. I've never really considered it as a fucking love song from the shadow, but there you go. That's Sleep Token, folks. Anyway, look, as you know, I could bang on about this for hours, and I do on Twitch a lot. And if you want to follow us on Twitch, if you think this was a deep dive, Jesus Christ, you should see some of the stuff we get into. So yeah, if you do want to follow me on Twitch, that's amazing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helps a little bit. And like I say, could all be bollocks, could all be absolute bullshit. But I hope it helps colour your experience of this incredible band. I know that this band has changed my life, and I know it's changed a lot of other people's as well. Speaking of changing my life, by the way, on screen now are all of my supporters over on Ko-fi. Now, without these guys, without you, I'm going to speak to you guys, actually. Thank you. You've honestly have absolutely changed my life, because now I'm able to spend time talking about music, researching it, going into the philosophical, the historical, the religious, the backgrounds. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for, if you want to give it a like and subscribe, that'd be amazing. And there's other stuff too. If you do want to support me on Ko-fi, there's a thing here, and it's down in the link below. You can become a member, and then you get access to early access to the videos, and you get exclusive videos, and you get access to the members only Discord, and there's all sorts. Oh, and then merchandise as well. I know literally we're down to the last 3 t-shirts. Thank you so much to everybody. God, I've shipped some fucking shirts all over the world over the last month, but thank you for your support. Honestly, I couldn't do it without you. We move on, of course, to Dark Signs next, and I know that that's quite often. In fact, we've got Dark Signs and then Higher, and I know that those are 2 Sleep Token songs that feature quite high on the list for a lot of people, not only just in their top 10 of Sundowning, which is only 12 songs long, but also in a lot of people's top 10 Sleep Token songs of all time, which is amazing. Anyway, we've got 43 songs left to go before we get to the end of Take Me Back to Eden, and then we'll obviously do a little bit of a redo through Even in Arcadia as well. And who knows, by then there might be new tours, new albums, new EPs. Who knows? But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I shall see you all very soon.